Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, wherever you are. I want to welcome you to our May M Talks, where startup innovation meets enterprise transformation. Today, we're honored to welcome Dan Selz, Impact Director for the X Prize Foundation. Dan leads the alumni network of over 450 teams from 14 past prizes, helping them to grow and scale both during and after the competitions. He also leads the impact work for active prizes, including X Prize's Rainforest X Prize, Rapid COVID Testing, and X Prize Feed the Next Billion, bringing together ecosystems of partners to help the technological breakthroughs of the competition translate into massive real-world impact. Dan joined X Prize after earning an MBA at the USC Marshall School of Business, where he was awarded the Satil Scholarship and inducted into the Beta Gamma Delta Honors Society. He's also earned certifications for technological commercialization and entrepreneurship. His career before X Prize spanned the globe, bringing entertainment and politics, including the writing of a Bollywood movie in Mumbai, we'll have to talk about that one day, and leading presidential campaign turnout efforts in Lansdale, Pennsylvania. Today, we will talk with Dan about how X Prize uses large-scale global incentive competitions to crowdsource solutions to the world's grand challenges, and how the organization strategically connects resources to commercialize and accelerate the scale of those innovations. Good morning, Dan, and welcome.
Good morning, Michael. Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here virtually today. So I think let's just dive into it. Are the slides up? Okay, looks like they're up. Slides are up. Everyone can hear me. Let's dive in. So excited to talk a little bit about X Prize, what we do, how we design our competitions and activities, how we think about scale, and hope that this is valuable and there's some lessons that we can share with all of you on the call today. So I think I heard somewhere that the longest, I think it was like the Navy figured out that the longest presentation anyone could effectively listen to was 18 minutes. So I promised to have a short deck that comes in a little bit under that, and then I think we'll do some Q&A with Michael, and then I believe open it up to all of you guys for questions. So yeah, let's just get into it. Next slide, please. So what is X Prize? Some of you may have heard of us, pretty famous out there, I think, in the world of prize competitions. Our mission is about inspiring and empowering humanity to achieve breakthroughs that accelerate a hopeful future for all. So today, I think we're going to talk a little bit about what that means exactly and how we do that through prizes and other activities. So with that, if we can get into the next slide, and this handsome gentleman, if you recognize him, congratulations, you win the unofficial trivia question. This is Charles Lindbergh. And if you're American, you've probably heard of Charles. You might have even been able to recall from 8th grade history or whatever that he was the first guy to cross the Atlantic in an airplane. What you might not know, or you probably don't know, is that he did so to win a prize. There's somebody that is not as well known to history, Raymond Ortigue, a French-American hotelier. And in 1919, he offered a $25,000 prize to the first person to fly nonstop from New York City to Paris or vice versa. And it took 8 years, I believe, and then Charles Lindbergh was the person that won that prize in 1927 with the plane he's standing next to there, pretty famous, the Spirit of St. Louis. And we're gonna, in the talk today, I'll come back. I think there are a lot of sort of instrumental lessons learned about what we took away from the Orteig Prize and Charles Lindbergh. But suffice to say, it's an incredible story. There's actually a book about this, and he was just sort of a random mail carrier somewhere in the Midwest. Was not, if you'd scanned everybody alive in the 1920s working on aviation, he's not the person you probably would have thought of that was going to sort of crack this really tough nut of crossing the Atlantic. So that brings us to X Prize. And next slide. And the original Ansari X Prize, that maybe some 70 odd years after Charles Lindbergh crossed the Atlantic, our chairman and founder, Peter Diamandis, was really, really passionate about how do we open up space to everyone, right? At the time in the 90s, space was basically something that governments did, and really just pretty much two governments mostly. And he had this crazy audacious idea of what if space could be open to the masses? What if it wasn't just governments, but private companies that could allow access to space? And so he was able to connect with the Ansari family, who sponsored a $10 million competition that was all about how do we open up this sort of final frontier of space. And this is almost like, canon for being able to work at X Prize. I think specifically to win the Ansari X Prize, you had to build a craft privately funded that could get to 100 kilometers of altitude, land safely, 100 kilometers of altitude while carrying 3 paying passengers or the equivalent weight, land safely, and then do it again within 3 days. And it took a number of years, but then Burt Rutan and Scaled Composites were able to build Spaceship One, which is what you see here, and actually win that prize. Charles Branson wound up buying the technology, creating Galactic Virgin Orbit, and really catalyzed the private space industry, obviously SpaceX and Blue Origin and others that we see today. So again, a lot of lessons learned from that one that we'll come back and talk about shortly. Next slide. And so this is just sort of a fun slide for us. This is the Smithsonian in DC, and you see Charles Lindbergh's craft Spirit of St. Louis right next to Spaceship One, the winning competition from the Ansari X Prize. But we've done a lot since then. So next slide. So basically, since that original Ansari X Prize, we've launched 25 more prizes, so up to 26 total, with cumulative prize purses of nearly $300 million. We've awarded 18 of them. And that number you see sort of in the middle, that $2 billion invested by the competing teams, that's another really important number for us that I'll come back and talk about. But the idea is basically just by putting a prize purse up there, you attract a lot of interest and get private individuals and their backers to invest even more to go out and win the prize and do the sort of technology R&D that we need to see. We have $200 million worth of prizes currently in development, about 15 there. So anybody on this call is interested in sponsoring a prize, we have all different kind of prizes at all different kinds of budgets, and happy to have conversations about any of that. Next slide. And the way we organize our work is across 3 sort of domains, as you can see here: exploration, environment, and human equity. And I'll be the first to admit those are pretty broad topics, right? So across those 3 things, we do a lot of different activities. I think that's a huge part of what makes X Prize so exciting. We obviously are very well known for our Space Prize and the Ansari Prize and the follow-on Google Lunar. But we've since launched things in a number of things around COVID, which I'll talk about, human learning prizes, deep sea ocean exploration, carbon and climate prizes. So just a really broad array of activities that we get involved in. Next slide. Okay, I want to spend a bunch of time here and happy to revisit any of this in the Q&A, but what makes a prize interesting or special, or kind of what do we think our secret sauce is behind running these competitions to unlock innovation? The top bullet you see there, it's all about setting an audacious but achievable goal. So when we're designing a prize, and part of my work with X Prize has been around designing our new competitions, we're really doing a lot of research to say, okay, what's really challenging? What's something that might not happen without an X Prize, but not literally impossible, right? Because if it's too easy, again, we probably don't need an X Prize. If it's impossible, we're wasting everyone's time. So what is that sort of sweet spot between really, really, really hard, but not actually impossible? The next bullet around defining and addressing a clear problem, super important to us. So, excuse me, going back to the Ansari Prize and some of those things I talked about, a lot of the work we do is scoping from a big, giant area like, unleashing private space travel to what are the real barriers. So some of the language that we had around those, the ship had to carry at least 3 people or the weight thereof. That was really around Peter's belief that one of the first markets for space for private companies would be tourism. So the idea with 3 people was that you could have a pilot and then 2 paying passengers. Obviously, the idea around the craft had to be privately financed because he wanted private companies, not governments, to just keep doing this. The reusability thing was a big part of it, and sort of his research. Part of why space was so inaccessible and why it was only governments doing it was the old model was you basically built the rocket, used it once, and threw it away. and think about how expensive, getting on a flight from New York to London would be if you threw away the 747 or whatever when you were done. So he was really passionate that these crafts had to be reused because that would solve the real problem of making space much cheaper and therefore more accessible. Democratizing innovation. This is another thing we love about prizes, right? All we're doing is we're saying, here's the problem, anyone can go solve it, right? So it really does open up the possibility of people that you wouldn't think being able to win a prize and solve a problem actually doing so. And that goes all the way back, like I said, Charles Lindbergh. Again, he was just sort of a random mail clerk. Apologies for the dog in the background. But Charles Lindbergh was just sort of a random mail guy. You didn't think he was the kind of person, if you were accepting applications necessarily for who's going to solve this transatlantic problem, you might not have given him a second thought. But our prizes really are open to anyone, and so that way democratizes innovation. Catalyzing markets. I think this gets into a big notion of this idea of scale that I know we're going to talk about today. But we want to make sure that we're not just running fancy science fair exhibits, right, for innovation that is done once in a lab and never goes anywhere, right? We really want to make sure that we're designing our prizes to create innovation that can scale, that can get onto markets, whether that's for-profit, not-for-profit, government markets. But that idea of being able to get out into the world is hugely important to us. And then there's this idea of leverage, right? That's something we've seen over and over again with our prizes that I mentioned on a previous slide. When we talk about leverage, we'll say, hey, if we have a $10 million prize purse, we typically see 5 to 10 times, so between $50 and $100 million actually invested by teams to win that prize. So if you're sitting there saying, hey, there's this problem that we think is going to take $100 million of R&D to crack, you could just put up a $10 million prize potentially, and then that would incentivize the rest of the money to come along and solve the challenge. Next slide. So that's a bit about prizes, but prizes are not all that we do. Starting last year, we launched the Pandemic Alliance, and that was really kind of out of necessity. The pandemic came along, and I think like many organizations in the world, it was sort of a wake-up call. How can we do things different, better, more efficiently? And I'll talk a little bit more about what an alliance is in a second, but just as you see on the screen, we now have the Health and Pandemic Alliance, Racial Equity Alliance, and then we're in the process of launching the AI Data Alliance, a Climate Alliance, an Abundant Energy Alliance to sort of solve problems at kind of this domain level. So next slide, I can talk a little bit about how these alliances work. But basically the idea with an alliance is, I've used the word catalyze a bunch, right? And I think one of the things we do pretty well at XPRIZE is we're catalysts. Convener is another word we use a lot. We bring together really incredible ecosystems around our prizes from the world of entrepreneurship and innovation and large corporates and governments, NGOs, academia. And I think with alliances, we sort of turned that model on the head, right? We said, well, instead of launching a prize and then building an ecosystem around it, what if we built the ecosystem first and then use that to launch prizes and do other activities? So that's really what an alliance is. The first step is identifying a domain level problem like challenges around racial equity or climate, energy, things like that. And then we start intentionally building out a really amazing ecosystem, including a lead brain trust and other hundreds of experts from all over the globe. And then we bring those experts together to say, okay, what are the challenges we're seeing here? We have sort of different kinds of jam sessions and ideation sessions and community discussions to identify problems, think about possible solutions, and then try and execute and launch those. And those solutions could be around prizes. So for example, with the Pandemic Alliance last year, we launched a bunch of sort of shorter, quicker prizes and challenges out of that. So things around the next generation of masks, more rapid and affordable COVID testing, new data modeling techniques and models to map the spread of the pandemic. But then we also launched things that weren't prizes, right? This idea of partner-led projects. So if anyone's familiar with Common Pass, which is sort of one of those initiatives to sort of almost have like a digital record or wallet of your, initially it was about the test results and spreading into vaccine records. That sort of came out of the Pandemic Alliance. It was a couple of stakeholders coming together and saying, this is a really incredible thing. It's not going to be a prize, but it's still a great project that we launched into the world. And then, how do we think about catalyzing the funding and support around that? So I think I just have one or two more slides if we can get to the next slide. One last activity to talk to you a little bit about, and that's global visioneering. And a question that we're asked a lot is, well, how do you design these prizes, or how do you come up with these particular prizes? And to be honest, traditionally, As a nonprofit, we've been led by, sponsor donor interest. So we would find people that were interested in a particular topic. We would assess whether that topic fit with kind of our purpose and mission. And then we would move to launch that. And we've been saying, well, how do we, we rely on kind of this global crowd to win the prize. How can we kind of open up to and democratize the creation of prizes in the first place? So we've just launched this idea of global visioneering, which is, as you see, basically a new program to design the next X Prize. So we're bringing together experts and visionaries across climate change, energy, health, and space. Those are our 4 tracks for the first year of the program. And again, curating discussions and workshops with hundreds of these experts to say, what do you guys see as the biggest problems out there? And where could a prize really come in and move the needle? Again, if there's any interest in that, happy to sort of, however we follow up after this event, connect people into that workflow. And with that, I think I hit my 18-minute target, and excited to, I guess, bring Michael back to the stage for some Q&A.
Thanks so much, Dan. This is fascinating in terms of how the Alliance creates the opportunity, and if you look at the work that you're doing in terms of setting audacious but achievable goals, addressing a clear problem, it's the same way businesses basically deal with the technology and the way we implement technology at Miratech for them. So it's just fascinating, the connection. So when you talk about scaling the prize, right? After the prize is awarded, take us to a place where it moves. What happens after? How does it move to market? The realization of those prizes, what succeeds, what doesn't?
Yeah. It's a great question, and it's one I think we're thinking a lot about at X Prize. So I can share a bit about what we've done, what we're doing, what works, and then always open for other ideas. But I think going back to sort of our origin and the very first Ansari Prize, what happened after that was there was a company that won that, Scaled Composites, and Richard Branson, as I think I mentioned, kind of swooped in, put $400 million of his own money in, and now you have a company that, depending on the day, or actually 2 companies, Virgin Galactic and Virgin Orbit, have like a combined $5 or $6 billion valuation. And in a lot of ways, that was great for us because huge success of getting to market. But I think it also, in a way, tricked us a little bit because that was so easy. It happened so organically. Richard just happened to know Peter, and so like, great, we run a prize and then magic, it gets right to market. And I think what we've realized since is it's rarely that easy, right? So what are the kinds of activities that we have to do to sort of help catalyze these markets and help our innovators get out to market? And I can provide a brief overview of this, and then we can kind of go wherever the questions are. But it's really, I think, starting with understanding what are the markets going to be around this prize. In some cases, we have prizes where the outputs are very clearly going to be commercial, very B2C kind of products, right? So, for example, our Feed the Next Billion prize is going to produce alternative proteins that we hope can get on the shelf at your neighborhood Walmart or whatever, right? In other cases, it's with our Google Lunar Prize. That's not something your average Joe Schmo is probably going to be buying, right? Their own lunar lander. So understanding what the different markets are going to be, who the customers are going to be, and then helping think through what are the kind of resources our teams will need to be successful. Because in general, I think we tend to maybe over-index a little bit on really smart engineers and researchers and academics, not necessarily experienced business people, right? So how do we help them think through how to make a pitch deck, how to think about your go-to-market strategy? How can we bring resources in to help around that? So happy to go into any of that that's of interest to you, Michael.
Can you tell us maybe a little bit about one that didn't scale, one that had some challenges, and just kind of point out the nuances and the differences and maybe why? Because look, technology, we build technology, everybody basically on the call today, but sometimes it scales rapidly, sometimes it doesn't, right? So give us a sense of what may have happened in terms of that failure.
Sure. I'll point to a couple of failures, and I think one is just sort of an interesting failure of us, X Prize. There was one prize we actually canceled. There was an Archon Genomics Prize that was about mapping the human genome that we launched, and then realized, whoa, the market is going way faster than this X Prize was calibrated to. We did our research wrong, basically. We thought we needed an X Prize to catalyze it. Turns out we didn't. So I think since then we've really tried to, and it's hard, right? This is probably more art than science, but really do an even more thorough lens of, who are the existing actors in the space and where are they going to take this in 3, 5, 10 years. I think another example of a challenge that has a happy ending. So I'm sort of punting on your question a little bit, Michael, but on the timeline thing, we had a progressive automotive X Prize. It was all about sort of developing electric cars, basically, back before electric cars were a huge thing. This was one of our early prizes. And for a long while, it seemed like, nothing was really scaling there, right? Like none of the winners were making a ton of progress. And then just like literally just this year, one of the winning teams or finalist teams, Aptera, sort of came back out of nowhere, and they're making a ton of noise, and they've raised a bunch of investment, and they're suddenly close to getting a product to market. So I think timelines are hugely important, right? And being honest with ourselves and our stakeholders about like, for rapid COVID testing, because of the urgency of that, we wanted to design a prize where we would have innovation that could scale right away. For other things, it might take a decade or longer, right? So just understanding that timeline challenge is, I think, a big part of the problem.
Interesting. So sometimes you're a little ahead of the market curve, even, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Great. In terms of your most impactful innovation to date, what specifically, maybe describe a little bit about what that has been and how it's really affected the future of the world.
Sure, absolutely. I would say to date, probably our biggest, most well-known, most impactful one has been Virgin Galactic and Virgin Orbit. And again, I think sort of an interesting takeaway here for that is, we were just sort of one prize, and there was one piece of technology that won it that became Virgin Galactic, Virgin Orbit. But by sort of having this very public, this very sort of telegenic prize, we attracted a lot of interest, right? And I think that's why you see companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin sort of come. So I think that ability to it's not just the teams that compete in the prize, but it's the megaphone that a prize can create that attracts a lot of innovation and the impact that you're talking about. But there's some other teams that I think from other prizes that are coming up that, are on the verge of being very impactful. I mentioned Aptera and the Automotive X Prize. So they, check them out. Google Aptera. They have an incredible sort of 3-wheeled car that has like 1,000-mile range and actually has solar panels, so it recharges. I can't wait to get my hands on one. I think that one's going to be pretty incredible. And then we have a couple ones sort of going back, and I can't claim that this is a particular insight, but I think we've seen our software prizes can scale pretty quickly. Software is just easier to scale than hardware, it turns out, right? So we have from the Adult Literacy Prize, there's a team learning upgrade that has technology that allows adult learners, which is like a huge problem I was totally unaware of before X Prize, just the tens of millions of people just in the US alone, adults who are low literate or illiterate. And so they're on a trajectory to get to, 100 million people, it seems, in the next decade. So some pretty incredible stuff there. And another company, CloudDX, they actually just went public on the Toronto Stock Exchange, but they have a software product that you just basically cough into your phone, and it has like AI and ML that can analyze that cough, tell you whether you have COVID, or it was actually designed around tuberculosis, which in non-COVID times is sort of the biggest, one of the biggest disease killers out there. So that's going to totally change the game for diagnosis there. So some pretty exciting things on the horizon, I think.
Very cool. What is the profile of a winning team? Is it an entrepreneur? Is it a large company? Is it students? And how can organizations make it work for them, that learning that you've gone through?
Yeah. I think to sort of maybe combine that, like one of the, again, going back to democratizing innovation, we see all kinds of winners, right? We see, in general, I think we lean more towards startups or newer companies, right? Because they're the ones that are willing to kind of take that bet and have the agility to throw their hat in the ring for an X Prize. But that can be anything from a company that's fairly far along. One of the winners of our past COSIA Energy Carbon Prize, they're already at Series D. They've raised $50 million. Some of our space prizes have raised over $100 million. So pretty large companies. And in some cases, it's a couple PhD students on the back of a napkin, right, with like a crazy idea that they then build during the prize. And you mentioned student-led teams. That's some of our favorite examples. I think the value of this, not just from the innovation itself, but the process we hear over and over again, the process of competing for a prize, the sort of, I think, inspiring call to action, and the pretty quick, audacious timeline for doing something, and the collaboration. So we have like a lot of college teams that enter. And in one case, in our Ocean Discovery Prize, we had a team of high school kids that was actually able to win, not just compete, but win the bonus prize in that one. There's actually a documentary. It's called Ocean Quest. That was the name of the team, Ocean Quest, on Amazon, if you want to watch. And that's just incredibly super inspiring stuff. I think as far as like what companies can learn from or sort of leverage from our approach, there are a few things I would point to. The first is, I think at its core, X Prize is really about trying a lot of different experiments, right? So, and we hear this over and over again, right? Like the teams that operate our prizes, that we call prize operations teams, they'll see teams registering and they'll see the white papers or the early prototype, and never publicly, but behind closed doors, they'll be like, okay, I think team A is going to win, or I think team B is going to win. And they're almost always wrong, right? So I think that's really the
handicapping, huh? They're handicapping.
Exactly. Of course, full objectivity. And by the way, we never judge our prizes. That's a side note, but to make sure that we really can be objective, we recruit independent panels. But yeah, so you sort of have because it's human, right? You have a gut feeling, oh, this one's good, or this team seems smart, and then you get to whatever that final testing is, and again, we're almost always wrong. And I think that just the power of the X Prize model says, well, I can have an opinion, you, Michael, can have an opinion, prove it, right? Here's the set of objective criteria. Whoever can do it wins. And so I think for companies, rather than sort of rely on maybe your intuition, or this seems like the most promising path forward, if you can design an experiment, okay, I might think path A or solution A is the best way to solve this problem, but let's open it up. Let's see what the other options are and figure out how we evaluate what success is. And then we'll let the chips fall where they may. I think there are a lot of surprises and great learning that comes from that sort of experimental mindset. Sorry, did we want to get to the next question?
No, go ahead, finish. I'm sorry.
Let me just one more kind of tip that I would throw out around there is we try really hard, and this is related to the experimental lens, but we want to be problem specific, solution agnostic, right? So again, I think when it comes to like biases and assumptions, we can assume, oh, this way is how we're going to solve the problem. We're going to solve this challenge with drones, or we're going to solve this challenge with XYZ. And again, I think the more that you can kind of take that bias or assumption out of it and say, well, here's the problem, and I don't really care how it gets solved. What piece of technology is going to be used to solve that? I think a great example of this, we're in the process of launching a wildfire X Prize. That's all about how do we put out these devastating wildfires we see in California and elsewhere before they become really big. This is a great example. I think we're all sort of assuming there's going to be a drone with some sort of like giant water balloon, but who knows? We've already been speaking with innovators. There are people there that have ideas for like a centrally placed water mortar that's just going to like lob water grenades, or like a high altitude platform with like kamikaze gliders. There are folks there that have ideas for how to use sound waves to put out the fire. So again, the problem is we need to put these fires out quickly, and you and I might have guesses about how that's going to be done, but let's not sort of presuppose what the solution is going to look like. So I think, again, there are lessons learned for others.
It's fascinating. Clean slate and agility, which is, I guess, a lot of the things that organizations have to work with. And that kind of leads to the next question. What can companies leverage from X Prize's approach? You have the diverse ecosystem, you have lots of experimentation, you have them being problem specific, et cetera, you were saying. So, how do you take that and build that into the culture of an organization?
Yeah. So you mentioned diverse ecosystem, and just to touch on that, I think one of the things that we do really well and is really exciting is just getting the diversity of opinions and voices on a problem, right? How do we bring in not just, oh, this is the way a large corporate is going to solve a problem, but academia or government. It's not even when it comes to solving, just even in the understanding what the problems are, right? Like a basic level of research and understanding, just getting a lot of different voices and perspectives on an issue. And I think one other thing I'll just mention on this, which is in a way it's an analog to like the Amazon idea of being like really customer centric, right? But I think for us, our customers in a lot of ways are our teams, right? And the people that come in and compete for a prize. So looking at an issue through their lens of, okay, well, this is how, X Prize might be thinking about how you need to get to scale, but what are your challenges? And again, and a lot of times we're wrong, right? When we assume here's the problem that entrepreneurs are facing in a particular space. So just really taking the time to make sure we're listening to teams and understanding where they're coming from, and not sort of assuming that what we learned in the last prize teams will be the same with this prize teams, and understanding the variety there, I think, is another really important idea.
Very cool. Okay, we're kind of hitting our end time. I'm going to spend about another minute, just a couple other questions, if I can. But I just want
Sure.
to let you know we're going to spend 2-3 minutes overtime here. Uh, Quickly, how does a company get involved with XPRIZE, and that commercialization process to get a return if they're making an investment? How does that work
Yeah.
if they're interested?
Totally. And there are a lot of ways that companies can get involved with XPRIZE. Traditionally, one of the main ways was sort of sponsoring a prize or an activity. And as far as sort of how companies think about returns, and we've had like a number of, some of the biggest, most blue chip companies in the world sponsor our prizes. So Google sponsored the Google Lunar Prize, Qualcomm sponsored the Tricorder Prize. Shell sponsored our Ocean Discovery Prize. So and I think they all did it for different reasons, right? I think there are a lot of benefits to this kind of engagement. In some cases, it is sort of like a research effort, right? Like companies may or may not want to actually own the IP, and to be clear, we don't. It's not like we as X Prize or our sponsors automatically take the IP of whoever is competing in the prize. What we typically can do is sort of have a right of sort of first negotiation for a sponsor if they're interested in that. But a lot of times a company might just say, well, we don't really care whether or not we own it. We just want this new capability to exist in the world, right? So we can benefit from it. In other cases, there's like an awareness piece to it, right? It's sort of how a brand piece maybe, or in some other cases, it's kind of just a pure CSR thing. We as a corporate, this is with our values, and we think the world will be better if this problem is solved, so we want to sponsor it. And then just very quickly beyond sponsoring, I mentioned alliances. That's a great way to get involved. If you think that your industry would have a point of view on a particular challenge, we just want to talk to you if nothing else, even if you're not going to be a sponsor. So wildfire is a great example. Obviously, the insurance industry is very affected by that problem. So we've had a lot of great conversations just with different insurance companies around that. Yeah.
Okay, so that brings us to 2 minutes over. I want to thank you so much, Dan, for just a fascinating discussion on XPRIZE. You literally are making the world better.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
I think it's appreciated by all. And I think the idea of creating these alliances and broadening the way an organization looks to bring innovation into their own organization or with partners is really part of how we at Miratech also look at our partner network and the way we bring value to the marketplace. So it's a terrific connection. And I can't thank you enough for your time today. And we'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks so much. Appreciate the time.
Have a
Be
good
well.
day.